Hi, Claire here from Pitt News Magazine. Welcome to another dose of Pitt News on Air. You've probably heard the saying, follow the money. But what if that money trail leads straight into the halls of Washington? This week, our own Grant Thorne pulls back the curtain on Intel, government stakes, congressional trades, and the messy marriage of politics and profit. Spoiler alert, it's not just capitalism anymore. It's something much bigger and maybe scarier. So grab your coffee, your charts, and maybe a stress ball. We're diving into where power meets portfolio.
Okay, imagine this scenario. You've got a huge tech giant, a real household name, and they are just hemorrhaging money. Billions.
Yeah, staring into a pretty deep financial hole.
Exactly. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, the government steps in with this massive lifeline. A bailout, you'd think?
Right, seems straightforward enough.
But here's the twist, and this is where it gets really interesting. The government doesn't just want to lend a hand. They want in. They want a piece of the company.
Not just any piece either.
No, a serious chunk. We're talking a potential 10% equity stake. So welcome, everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into something that's, well, it's fascinating, maybe a bit unsettling for some. It's right there at the crossroads of big tech, government moves, and high finance.
Yeah, we're focusing on all the recent talk around the U.S. government maybe taking an equity stake in the chip maker Intel.
And our guide through this complex story is a really compelling piece called Follow the Money. It's by Grant Thorne, who's a Washington correspondent for Pitt News Magazine.
Thorne's known for digging deep, right?
He is. And this piece really tries to peel back the layers on this Intel deal. So our mission today is basically to pull out the key insights, the important facts, maybe some surprising details for you.
Yeah, help you understand what might really be going on behind the headlines.
Precisely. So let's get into it.
Okay, so where do we start? Intel's situation, I guess.
Yeah, we have to start there. The financial picture Grant Thorne paints is pretty grim. He reports Intel posted, what was it, $19 billion in losses in 2024.
$19 billion, yeah. And he mentions more red ink expected for 2025. So this isn't just like a bad quarter.
No, not at all. It's a serious crisis for a company that's usually seen as a pillar of the industry.
And that's the context for the government stepping in, right?
Exactly. So the core proposal is this. The federal government is negotiating for a 10% equity stake.
Okay, but crucially, this isn't like they're just handing over billions more in cash, right?
Right. That's key. Thorne points out it's a conversion. They're taking $10.9 billion in existing CHIPS IPS Act subsidies.
That's money Congress already approved to boost U.S. chip making.
Correct. And they're converting that funding into non-voting stock in Intel.
Non-voting, that's an important detail. So technically, no direct say in running the company day to day.
Technically. We'll come back to whether that distinction holds water later, but what was the immediate market reaction?
Well, interesting thing there. Intel's shares actually went up about 7-8% pretty quickly after the news broke.
Which, on the surface, looks like the market saying, okay, this is good. Stability.
Yeah, seems like approval. But the players involved are also pretty interesting.
Who's driving this from the government side?
Thorne names Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent as leading the charge.
Okay, standard enough.
But the supporter that Thorne highlights as, well, surprising, is Senator Bernie Sanders.
Really? Sanders? What's his take?
His quote is pretty direct. If taxpayers are footing the bill, they should own a piece of the upside. Makes a certain kind of sense, I suppose.
Huh. Okay, but Thorne himself isn't buying this simple narrative, is he?
Not at all. He jumps in almost immediately with some really strong language, calls it state capitalism in drag.
Wow, okay.
And a soft nationalization. He basically argues that government equity, even if it's non-voting, always creates this kind of web of influence. It's never just financial.
State capitalism and drag. That's quite a phrase. It really forces you to question the motive, doesn't it? A soft nationalization. What makes Thorne so sure it's about control and not just, trying to save a vital American company?
Well, he leans heavily on his background covering defense contracting. He says he's seen similar moves there.
Okay.
He argues the official story about, boosting domestic chip production, helping competition that's just the public face.
The spin.
Maybe. Thorne thinks the real game is about control and setting the chessboard for the future. He claims these government interventions in defense weren't just about helping companies. They were about steering contracts, controlling the bleeding edge tech.
So he applies that same logic here.
directly. His conclusion is pretty stark. He writes, Intel isn't being saved, it's being absorbed.
Absorbed. That's
Yeah.
that's a much heavier word than saved. What does absorbed really mean here? How's it different?
It implies, I think, a loss of independence, not just a temporary financial fix, but a fundamental shift, a deeper entanglement with government interests and potentially government direction.
Right. More permanent.
Exactly. And then Thorne throws another curveball into the mix. SoftBank.
SoftBank,
Yeah.
the Japanese investment giant. What about them?
Yeah. He points out that around the same time all this government equity talk is happening, SoftBank makes a pretty big $2 billion investment in Intel.
Huh. Interesting timing.
Thorne certainly thinks so. He asks this really pointed question. What does it mean when you have foreign private capital, like SoftBank and U.S. public capital, kind of elbowing each other for position on the same board?
Are they working together or competing?
Exactly. Are they coordinating somehow? Is it a race for influence inside Intel? It adds this whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It makes the picture way more complicated than just government health struggling company. And this leads us to a part of Thorne's investigation that is, well, it was quite eye-opening.
The money trail.
Yeah, following the money. Thorne has this great line in Washington. The money moves before the press release, and Congress is often first in line.
Oof. That sounds cynical, but maybe realistic.
Well, he provides some specifics. His sources pointed him towards some, let's say, interestingly timed congressional trades in Intel stock.
Okay, like what?
For instance, Republican Representative Michael McCall. He sold between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of Intel stock back in December 2024.
And the timing.
Thorne calls it suspiciously well-timed, with Intel's really bad financial news starting to solidify.
Okay. One example could be coincidence, I guess.
But it's not just one. He also flags Representative French Hill, a Republican from Arkansas. Hill sold off somewhere between $15,000 and $50,000 in Intel shares in June-July 2025.
And that was when?
According to Thorne, right before the equity rumors hit the press.
Okay, that timing does feel pretty convenient. Almost too convenient.
Thorne seems to think so. And he mentions others too, Representatives Jonathan Jackson, Daniel Goldman, who were apparently buying and selling Intel in rhythm with the company's legislative fortunes.
So what's Thorne's conclusion? Is he alleging illegal insider trading?
He's careful there. He says it might not meet the legal definition of insider trading, but he calls it political arbitrage.
Political arbitrage. What does he mean by that?
Basically, using non-public, but maybe not strictly legal, information about government actions or policy shifts to make advantageous trades, leveraging political insight for financial gain. He says it's rampant.
So not necessarily illegal, but ethically questionable and, as he puts it,
a tell. He sees these trades as a signal, a tell, revealing that some people with political access knew something was coming down the pike with Intel and the government long before the public did.
a tell. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And Thorne's argument goes beyond just Intel, right? He thinks this is bigger.
Much bigger. He positions this whole Intel situation as potentially a test case.
A test case. Like a blueprint.
Exactly. A model, he calls it, for how the government might intervene in key industries going forward. He clearly thinks this isn't just a one-off.
Okay, so if Intel is the test case, who does he think might be next if this model proves, successful from the government's point of view?
Well, he casts a pretty wide net. He mentions other big chip makers, obviously, like NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm.
Makes sense given the Cheech PS Act focus.
But also defense contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed, even potentially Tesla or Boeing.
Yeah.
Big, strategically important companies.
Wow. So he sees a potential future where the government holds equity stakes in a whole portfolio of major U.S. corporations.
That seems to be his concern, that we're moving past just subsidies or regulations into actual partial ownership, this kind of deeper intertwining.
And if that happens, Thorne is worried about who benefits, right? He talks about quiet winners.
Yes, very pointedly. Who wins in these deals? Often behind the scenes.
According to Thorne, it's folks like the politicians who made those timely trades we just talked about.
Right.
Lobbyists who, grease the path to make the deal happen. And even potentially competitor companies who suddenly find themselves favored. Or others mysteriously boxed out of future contracts.
It's a pretty cynical view of how these big government business deals can play out. Public risk, but private, often hidden, gain.
Which leads him to his big framing. the Trojan horse of state capitalism. Why that specific analogy?
Well, he defines state capitalism as exactly the kind of system the U.S. often criticizes China for, right? The government heavily subsidizing and propping up its own national champions.
Using state resources to pick winners and losers in the market.
Precisely. And Thorne's punchline is, essentially, the U.S. is now doing the same thing, just maybe more subtly. He calls it cronyism with a bureaucratic gloss.
Public risk for private gain. And the fact taxpayers don't even get voting rights for their stake.
Yeah, that seems particularly galling to him. So the Trojan horse idea is that it's presented as something positive like national security or competitiveness, but it's actually smuggling in a fundamental change to the economic system, undermining market principles from within.
And he finds Bernie Sanders' support for this telling.
He does. He seems to suggest that when someone like Sanders, usually critical of corporate power, supports the government taking an ownership stake, it's a sign that maybe it's not really capitalism at all anymore in the traditional sense.
So for Thorne, this isn't just a policy tweak.
No, he sees it as a fundamental rewrite of American economic philosophy, the government shifting roles.
From regulator to co-investor.
Yeah, and from policymaker to portfolio manager almost. It's a profound shift in the relationship between the state and private enterprise as he sees it.
That's a huge claim.
It is. So let's just quickly recap where we've landed after this deep dive. We started with Intel, a tech giant in trouble.
Facing massive losses, yeah.
Then comes this government lifeline. But it's not just cash. It's an equity stake, converting existing subsidies.
Around 10% non-voting stock.
But Grant Thorne, in his piece Follow the Money, urges us to look much deeper. He raises flags about potential government control, even without voting rights.
That idea of soft nationalization or being absorbed.
He points to those suspiciously timed stock trades by members of Congress as a tell.
Suggesting some knew what was coming. Political arbitrage, he called it.
And he argues this isn't just about Intel. It could be a test case, a model for future government intervention in key industries, possibly leading towards a form of American state capitalism.
With those quiet winners benefiting behind the scenes.
Right. It's a complex picture, far from a simple bailout story.
Which really leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question, building directly on Thorne's analysis.
What's that?
If this Intel deal, this lifeline with strings attached, really could become a template for reshaping whole sectors of the economy, then the next time the government tells you a major intervention is about national security or boosting competitiveness, you really have to ask yourself Thorne's implicit question.
Who really profits when all the dust settles?
Because, as Thorne insists throughout his piece, someone always does.
And that's it for today's Spotlight. Grant Thorne, showing us that when Uncle Sam buys a silent piece of intel, somebody's cashing in. The question is, who? If you loved this deep dive, don't stop here. Subscribe to Pitt News Magazine at pittnews.com for more stories that go beyond the headlines. And hey, don't forget to follow our brand new Pitt News on Air podcast, where every Wednesday we take these articles off the page and into your earbuds. Until next time, remember the market talks, but the money whispers. And if you follow the money, you'll find the truth.